Welcome to the How to Life podcast by LifeWorks, a modern day advice column for young adults.
Where we answer your questions on how
To
life.
welcome back to the How to Life podcast with D and T. Today's question is all about fears and how to overcome them. Dear D and T, what is some tangible advice to push past your fear and go for what you deeply desire in moments where fear, other people's opinions, or the inner saboteurs come up? How do I stay mentally strong in these moments, block the noise, calm the fear, and go for it?
Thank you for submitting this question. We think it's really topical, especially after recently reading this story about this university in Arizona that had taken over an arboretum or like a biosphere to do experiments on plant testing, and actually had some really interesting learnings that you could apply to your own life. So what they were trying to focus on was growing the perfect tree. And what they did was they controlled and they gave it the perfect temperature, the perfect air, the perfect environment, the perfect soil to try and grow the perfect tree. But what they were finding out was as soon as it was reaching near maturity, as it grew a certain height, they would topple over, just fall right over. And when they started doing some testing, what they realized when they cut into the tree was that in each of its rings were perfect circles. Perfect soil, perfect environment, perfect rings, perfect circles. What that told them was actually that because the biosphere was a completely controlled environment, it didn't give them wind. There was no natural wind resistance. So what happens when trees grow and why they kind of have abnormally shaped rings throughout the years is they actually bolster themselves, they strengthen their rings and their wood in areas where they're facing challenges, facing wind resistance. And without that challenge, without that resistance, trees aren't able to grow strong while they grow tall. And I think that's a very interesting lesson that we can all apply, where a lot of times we wait for the perfect moment, we wait for not having any fears or any doubts surrounding any opportunities that might come our way. And what we're really telling ourselves in those moments is we're waiting for the perfect opportunity, the perfect right time. And what this experiment from the trees kind of can teach us is that resistance and challenge is a part of life. And it's not just a part of it, it's a necessary part. It's the very part that allows you to grow resilient and strong, to grow tall like a tree.
When I heard this story, I just thought it was so beautiful in how we can learn so much from nature and reflects a lot of, I think, the issues that we go through, but simplifies it in a way that we can easily understand. I thought it was perfect for today, and we kind of wanted to break it down into 3 sections and give you 3 actionable steps to address your fear and work through them. So the first step is tackle the fear head on. I know it's counterintuitive, but I challenge you to pause and ask yourself, where's this fear really coming from? What is the worst case scenario? Really? A lot of times when we follow that all the way to the core, we realize it's not really that plausible, right? Like, my worst case scenario, for example, in starting a business is that it won't work out and everybody will view me as a failure and I'll never recover from it. I feel like that's just a very human, natural fear. But how true is that, really? We have to take a look at where we're at in the present, as well as look back at all of our experiences, which is evidence to why we got here in the first place, to why we're making this decision, why we made this choice, or are about to make this choice in the first place. For me, choosing to start a business, being an entrepreneur is something that I have always wanted. So one, there's that really deep desire that I have not been able to shake for pretty much my whole life. I've worked many jobs. I keep arriving back here. So that's one reminder, right? The second is to look back at all of the success and challenges that I've faced, that I've overcome, that have shown me that one, I am capable, I am strong, and lastly, that when I take a leap and I take a chance, I will figure it out and can succeed. In every new opportunity I have tried, I have found a way to succeed. For me, that is the evidence that I need to stay grounded in order to keep me moving forward, in order for me to be able to make that decision. Doesn't mean it's not scary, but it definitely quiets a lot of the noise and centers you where you're at right now, who you are today.
Thank you for sharing that. That was great. To kind of summarize that and encapsulate it, so our first point is really to reflect on your roots, like those trees in the experiment. Really look back on all of your experiences that made you who you are today, to debunk your catastrophizing, to prevent yourself from giving in to these worst case scenarios, and regaining the power and confidence in yourself by looking at the facts, looking at the evidence of the life that you've lived that show you that you won't act in those ways that you fear, that you won't end up, ruining your life just for trying to do something new by having a little courage and a little faith. I think if you really take a step back and look at your life, you'll realize that in the moments where you have done that, you've turned out just fine. You've turned out okay. And just like then, as with now, it'll be okay. You can face your fears by examining them, taking a look at your roots, and showing that you are who you say you are. And I think that she touched on a great point about the things that carry us and move us forward. So to kind of keep with this analogy of the tree, the second step that we wanted to give as actionable advice is, in the same way that trees grow toward the sunlight, they grow toward the sources of nourishment that encourage them and uplift them. In that same way, after you've debunked your fears and reflected on your roots and understood who you are, imagine who you want to be. Give yourself that time to envision the exact, place you're trying to get to, the exact type of person you'd like to be. And it starts with envisioning that in your mind, reaching for some opportunities in the future that fill you with a feeling of optimism. And it's really that ability to look forward to each new day, to each new sunrise with positivity. I'm not sure if I heard this somewhere, but I've always thought of it as, in these instances where you're really reflecting on what to do with your life, a lot of times you feel like you're at the bottom of the ocean. And sometimes it requires you to be surrounded by darkness to look up towards the sunlight and find that light so bright that you'll do anything to get there. Not anything, in terms of anything bad, but sometimes you need that contrast to really appreciate how bright of a future you can have. And that can inspire you and propel you past all of your fears.
I beg you to ask yourself, after what's the worst thing that could happen, what's the best thing that could happen? Take that even a step further. What if this goes better than I could even imagine? Allow yourself that joy. Allow yourself to spend some time there mentally, because fear comes up to try to keep us safe, right? Fear is just an indication that we are trying something new, and change is scary. But again, look at all the evidence and fuel yourself with positivity, continuing to ask yourself, what if this goes better than I could even imagine? Continuing to combat that until you get used to it. What if this goes better than I could even imagine? And for this step 3, I really want to go back to your question, the second part of your question, where you asked, how do I stay mentally strong in these moments? Block the noise, calm the fear, and go for it. I think it's quite simple. You just have to make a choice. You have to choose to stay on your path. And this is why finding your why and going through that exercise is probably the best first step you could do on your journey, because that needs to be so solid that when the inevitable challenges come, they're going to shake you, but that you're able to stay on your path. The noise will always be there. but it could either shake you or it could break you. Make a choice and stick to it. Trust yourself in that choice on your path. And in terms of the mental strength, just like any muscle, you got to work it. If you're starting somewhere new, you're going to feel a little bit more vulnerable. But just like you have in your past, continue with action and build evidence. And maybe it's tiny moments throughout your day where you're like, okay, I sent that email that I said I was going to do. Okay, I'm doing it. That's one step I took today. And then soon that's going to turn to big milestones of, oh my God, got my first paying client today, or I got my first gig. And that's more evidence. And then that confidence and that mental strength as you continue to overcome challenges, problem solve, and again, stay trusted or stay rooted in trusting yourself, it'll come. You just have to keep going.
I love what you said earlier about it can shape you or it can break you. And I think to kind of circle it back to the analogy of the tree and the story and the research, it was, when we face these headwinds, it can shape us, it can push us over, it can topple us, or we can plant firmly in our roots, stretch toward the sun, and embrace it, grow through them. Then we can reflect on the oddly shaped rings of each passing year and when we were challenged and we were battered, but we came through. We can look at those things with pride because we weathered the storm. And that's what it's really about. Resilience, grown through confidence. Sometimes things will get hard. You have to get comfortable being uncomfortable. It doesn't mean you shouldn't prioritize rest and growth in comforting spaces, but understanding that a little bit of challenge will push you in the right direction. And ultimately, like you said, it'll snowball into one day looking in the mirror and realizing that you can tackle any challenge that comes your way. Something that came up recently, I saw an excerpt from an interview with Jensen Huang, the CEO of NVIDIA, who I believe was talking about resilience specifically, and in the context of its relationship with expectations. He was describing in his professional field that he encounters a lot of intelligent people from some of the top universities in the world, working at some of the best and brightest companies in the world. And what he noticed was that a lot of those people have very low resilience in certain cases. And that was tied to their experiences, and a lot of times coming right out of academia, from the top institutions in the world, where they have these expectations built in. They are incredibly smart. They've worked very hard. They were able to go to these top institutions. They have these expectations of themselves and other people. They were also surrounded by people who also have all these high expectations. But as soon as you enter the arena that is business and entrepreneurship, a lot of those expectations hit a wall. Things don't perform as you thought they would. You don't perform as maybe you thought you would, and your expectations slam right up against the ceiling of reality. And some people can't take that. It's a difficult thing to be able to understand your limits, and without diminishing your objective strengths, being able to push past them, pushing past the disappointment when your expectations just don't match what you're getting out of it.
Staying humble.
Staying humble. Yeah, I think staying humble was a key to overcoming that, because your expectations are really always just coming from a feeling of entitlement, maybe. When you
100%.
expect something, yeah, you're feeling entitled to the outcome that you were expecting. Life has its own way. Things won't always turn out the way that you want them to, but resilience comes down to your internal response to external experiences. And the more you keep that in mind, the less you'll be disappointed, and the more you can just enjoy the ride. You can take comfort in the fact that the lows are temporary and will pass, and stay humble in the moments of your highest achievements, knowing that those too will pass, and that regardless of where you're at or what's happening, that you will be okay. That's resilience.
I love that. I think that's a perfect way to kind of round out our conversation. And I would encourage you, to also look inward and ask yourself, what are my expectations? Because a lot of times, not only is the fear rooted, in a fear of change, but it's likely driven by high expectations that you're also afraid that you won't meet. Maybe it's a timeline, maybe it's a certain result. All of these are attachments that are leaving you in analysis paralysis right now. And like Tate just said, why are you doing this if not to enjoy the ride? Clearly, you're looking to take a leap. And you mentioned this being something that you deeply desire. So trust that and let yourself enjoy it, because life is short.
Thank you so much for your question. Just to summarize again, our 3 steps, keeping in mind that story of the perfect moment and the tree. To address your fears, to push past them, first remember to reflect on your roots. Reflect on who you are, how you came to be where you are, and use those experiences and memories to debunk your worst case scenarios, to prevent catastrophizing and analysis paralysis, and being able to take comfort in the fact that you can stand strong. And in that second step, remember to look toward the sun, look on the brighter side of things, envision your best case scenario. And like Dana said, imagine if things go even better than you could ever possibly envision, and use that to motivate you and push past your fears. And finally, keep in mind that wind is just a natural part of life. You can take it like a light breeze on the cheek, or plant your roots, stand strong, stand firm when the headwinds and challenges of life push you to stay strong and to stand tall.
You got this. Thanks for listening. We'll see you next time.
Visit the links in our bio to submit your questions on how to life
Or book a coaching session with us.